Hey, it's Caleb. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe. Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to your database design series. In the last video we talked about designing one-to-one relationships. This video we'll be talking about designing one-to-many relationships. First, I want to bring back an example from the last video into this video so we can kind of explain the differences between one-to-one and one-to-many. So in the last example, we had a credit card company where a person is allowed to have only one card, and a one card can only be owned by one person. Let's draw that out. We'll just draw the table and the columns within that table. So we have two tables here. We have the user table, and then we have the card table. This is when we store a one-to-one relationship over multiple tables. Otherwise, we could just store it as a column because, we're only storing one thing. We have the user ID, and then we have a card ID. And then to connect these as a one-to-one relationship, we have a foreign key, so we put a connection with the card ID in the user table, the user ID in the card table. So card ID, user ID. What that does is it connects these tables. So the user ID to this user ID, card ID to this card ID. That is how we would make a one-to-one relationship over two tables. And then we can store other stuff about the user in this table, other stuff about the card in this table. Now to convert this to a one-to-many, we can change just something very small. A one-to-many relationship would be saying one user can have many cards, but a card, specific card, can only be owned by one user. So there's no, a card can't be owned or co-signed or owned by two people. Now the way we do this is, let me just erase these columns real quick. Let's just start from scratch. So we have a user table, and then we have a card table. Once again, we need IDs for both of them, so we have a user ID and then a card ID. The user owns multiple cards, and we don't know how many they own. They can have one, they could have two, they could have three, they could have four, they could have five. So it wouldn't make sense to put the card ID in here as multiple columns. Because if we put 5 columns for card ID, well then what if someone had 6 cards? What are they going to do? They're not going to be able to have a 6th one. So what we do is we put the user ID in the card table. Which points back to the user ID in this table. So now, if we made specific examples of this, let's say we had this guy here. Let's give him a top hat, yeah. Alright. So we got this guy right here, and his user ID is 63. Just a random generated number by the database. Well, we also have cards over here. So we have this credit card, we have this credit card. We're actually drawing our cards here. So we have the barcode and the name and the codes and all that crap. And then we have this card over here. We make a connection. We want all of these to point back to this guy. So we give it a user ID. We could say the user ID 63. 63. 63. So now we know that each card is owned by the user with the ID of 63, which we can figure out is this guy. Whatever his name is, we can join that. So now we store a one-to-many relationship in two tables where the many side gets a foreign key to the one side. And if you don't know about foreign keys, that's fine. Basically, in simple terms, a foreign key is just that ID connection. This user ID is a foreign key that points to the user ID in the main table. foreign key points to the primary key in the primary table. This is also said to be a parent-child relationship. This will be the parent because every single child has to point back to the parent. That is how we store a one-to-many relationship in a database. So how would we know if we had this example, we had a comment section on a shopping website. So you're allowed to leave a review. Yeah. Let's say you can leave a review. And we had this table, this table set up. We had the users, and then we had the reviews. And we had a user ID, and then we had a review ID. I just give that to every single table. I give every table an ID. Then we have the username, and then we have the actual review. So the user has a username, the review has the actual comment, and we could also say, we have a review title. So we could say like, oh, this review is this product sucks, or this product's really awesome. And then we can have a paragraph saying why that product's awesome, for example. Right now, this is not properly designed because there's no connection between the user and the review. Because if we look at the review table, who posted the review? It doesn't say. All we have is the review ID, the review, and the review title. It doesn't say who posted it. So if we put a key, a foreign key that points back to the user table, that would say that is the parent, the person who posted that review. So we could have a user ID which points back to the user ID in the primary table. Is this a one-to-one relationship, or is this a one-to-many relationship? Well, we could have multiple reviews, and each one would point back. So we could have another review, and we could have the same ID. Let's just think of some examples. Let's say we have the review ID of 6, and then the review is awesome or good, and it's by the user ID of 62. Well, then we could have another one with the review ID of 7, and it could say, great. And then we could have it from the user ID 62. Well, these are both from the user ID 62, so we could say this is a one-to-many relationship because multiple reviews point back to one user. If we wanted it so a user can only post one review, well then we need to put the review ID in the user table. So now we have this sort of like this double connection thing here. Because this review ID connects it. So it's saying only one review ID can be from the user. And honestly, this could probably be improved because the review is not necessarily connected to the user that directly. For example, if the website is solely for giving one review, well then we could give it a review ID. But that might not be the best example simply because the user might buy multiple products and each review could have a product ID. You see? So I mean it kind of gets complex and you just kind of have to study. But the review ID would probably be best to make it a one-to-many relationship because it wouldn't really make sense to have it as a one-to-one relationship. We want it as a one-to-many because multiple reviews for multiple products can be given. So this points to a product, this points to a product, this points to a product, and they're all by a specific user. Alright, so yeah, that's just some basic design concepts that you will need to understand. When you have a one-to-many relationship, just store it over two tables and give a foreign key to the many side pointing back to the one side. Alright, so sorry if that was too complex or too confusing, but I think as we go on it'll always make sense. And I know I say that like I'm a broken record or something, but yeah, seriously. Just studying, people like watch it and then they're like, I don't get this, I quit. Well, that's not how you learn. Like seriously, when I was in school, I never learned anything until 2 weeks after I took the test. Which I know is super frustrating because I could have learned it like 2 weeks earlier. But studying it, when I didn't understand it directly, is what made me learn it. And then I finally kind of got the concepts after a while. So just keep learning, keep watching, and I will see you in the next video.